going to run the class designer. By the way, one of the reasons I wanted to show you that stuff is because we have a lot of people who are using Dabo who don't have any interest at all in databases. They are WX Python people who just really like working in Dabo better. One guy said that, you know, somebody was lamenting the fact that, well, our documentation could use a little sprucing up and a little fattening up. But he was saying that when he used WX Python, he was constantly going to the online docs because he couldn't remember which particular syntax to use in this particular case. He said, since I started using Dabo, I mean, I know what it is, and when I don't, I can guess, and it's usually the right guess because it just seems more obvious. So, all right, here's our class designer. Now, if you've seen any of the screencasts, you know, this might be old hat. You can right-click, set up sizers in there, add controls. So if I were to set a vertical sizer in there, I can set, let's say, 3 slots. So that visually you can lay out your form. You can set properties of the different slots, so I can edit sizer settings on the fly. And I have this little thing, and as I click the border, you can see the border growing around the element that I right-clicked on. If I set expand to false, it just shrinks down to nothing. So that's kind of boring. And I can also change the proportion. So you can visually see the effect that your changes to the sizer settings, you know, will have on your resulting form. You don't have to guess. And this is, to me, is the biggest stumbling block to people moving from an environment where you define things in fixed positionings and fixed sizes and fixed everything. If you're going to do anything cross-platform, or even if you're just Windows only, let's say, and you want to have different Windows XP themes and buttons change size and fonts are different, sizers just like make it so much easier. So I can do stuff like that. And here's our property sheet. We can set up custom properties if we want. The other thing we can do here is get an object tree. So I can just say, let's delete that slot, and now we have the results here that we had before. Delete that one, and we're back to 1 slot. So this is the new stuff that I just did. I did this a couple of days ago, and it's a little palette that I can just take. Well, it looks familiar. It's sort of like what that right click was, but I can just take the vertical sizer, drag it, and drop it on there, and I get the same behavior that I did before. And works with controls too, so I can grab a, let's say, a drop-down list, and let's stick it up in there. All right, I haven't really worked on it too much, but I got this one going. So a grid, you can have a little visual feedback as to what you're dragging, and drop that on there. And how many columns? Let's give it 5. And there's our grid. So we have a little bit of drag and drop stuff in there.
How many sides of grid?
I'm sorry? Oh, how do I make the grid? The question was, how do I resize the grid? I can just drag these lines if I want and resize the columns individually. I can go to the property sheet here, and let's go to properties, and I can set, I can't set the width of that grid since it's in a sizer, but I can set any individual column. So I can go to that first column here and set its width to 33, and you can see it got real skinny. Okay, so you can do it interactively that way, or drag and it'll work that way. All right, but let's say I have something like this drop down is really annoying because I don't want something really, really wide and that skinny and cramped. So the other thing we also did is a sizer palette. And so what I can do with this particular palette is sort of like that right-click sizer settings thing, except it's live, and I can update it that way. I can tell it not to expand, to put it in the center. And if I click on, let's say, this thing, it automatically updates for this one, so I can change the proportion of this control if I want. Go back to here, and it reflects this one, and I can change its proportion. Okay? Now, the reason these things are good is what I'm going to be focusing on and hope to be showing in much more detail next PyCon is a full IDE, sort of like what you think of like if you were to fire up Delphi or Visual Studio or something like that, where you would have these little panels where you can interact with things. You can have code. I didn't even show you the code.